to return to his wife. In return for his selfishness, Penelope stayed true to her husband and had confidence in him. He did not make different moral dilemma decisions, but instead stayed passive, which is the opposite of a leader. He should have been more adamant at returning to his wife instead of taking so many years. In another part of the Odyssey, Odysseus and his men land on the island of Helios, the god of the sun. Odysseus warns his men not to eat the cattle of the god. However, the men did not listen to his orders. They devoured the cattle and were soon faced with raging waters created by the god of the sea, Poseidon. As stated before, the men also landed at a point on the land of Circe. His weak leadership in these situations cost him the control of his men. Without proper control of followers, leading is impossible. Leadership often seems like a one-way street, where the follower must follow without any reciprocation. Leaders must make decisions that could upset one or more parties to satisfy the needs and wants of another. Some parties may also wish to have one of their wants fulfilled that is morally incorrect in someone else's eyes. Therefore, disagreement and debate are commonplace in politics of any time or place. A complete satisfaction of all people in a situation is nearly impossible. To learn to both lead a group and to balance morality is quite a difficult skill to master. The greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. He is the one that gets people to do the greatest things. People will often forget what you did, but that does not make the actions any less effective or meaningful. It is not about the outcome of an action, but the action itself. If every leader expected complete respect for the decisions before they were made, there would never be action. Oedipus becomes the king of the city-state of Greece, called Thebes. He has many moral dilemmas as a leader of a small nation. When he was a child, an oracle tells him he will kill his father and marry his mother. He was unaware that he was abandoned by his royal parents and was adopted by his current parents. To prevent the oracle's declaration to come to fruition, he left his parents' home and was nomadic for a period. This decision was a moral dilemma because, from his perspective, he had to leave his parents to keep them safe. Later in the story, he ends up marrying his mother. When it is eventually discovered that he is related to the queen and that the late king's murderer is King Oedipus, he has the moral decision to make to either rule over a spiteful town or to confine to the shadows. His decision to kill a man for reasons other than war does not show a respectful quality of a leader. Marrying his mother was indeed accidental. However, this still removes the trust that he gained from the citizens of Thebes over the course of his reign by not leading at all responsibly. The citizens were not able to put trust in their leader and therefore were not willing to follow him. Oedipus did not make the difficult moral dilemma decisions to have the greater good in mind. He failed morally despite knowing the prophecy may come true at any moment of his life. Also, killing a man over such an act of being in the road is not morally just in any manner. He was a weak leader since he was unable to have the self-guidance of one, and therefore it cost him the trust of his followers. The play Antigone is full of moral dilemmas. This is one of the 3 Theban plays. The most common of these is the dilemma of Antigone's brothers. One brother fought for the city in which they lived. The other brother fought for another city in the opposite side of the war. They killed one another in battle and therefore were both in need of burial. Before any arrangements could be made, the king and these brothers' uncle, King Creon, made a decree that any man who fought against the city must not be buried. This decision was a moral dilemma because he had to make a decision of who he would satisfy. He did break the code of gods that stated that all men must be buried. However, he also needed to be seen as a strong leader. He could either let both brothers be buried and look weak, or force one to not be buried to create a sense of strength and role. This is a perfect example of a moral dilemma in leadership. Creon had to weigh the two situations and somehow take control of a city in the aftermath of revolt and war, which can be very difficult. However, it could also be said that Creon is commanding here, which is distinctly different than leader. Leadership does not equal command, but commanders should be leaders. Creon was able to make the hard moral dilemma decisions required to be a leader, and therefore would be considered a leader. Whether his morals are in line and the god's wishes is irrelevant to his leadership. The main difference between commanding and leadership is whether the people still have some level of will in the decision. For example, in democratic governments, such as that of Athens, people will work together to come to a decision of what will be done in a situation instead of a single tyrant making the decision. As Sophocles states in Antigone, all men make mistakes, but a good man yields when he knows his course is wrong and repairs the evil. The only crime is pride. This is very true for those in leadership who must know when they are making the incorrect decision. Tyrants often show signs of pridefulness when they silence everyone in their path that disagrees with their decisions. Pride is not a quality of leadership in any means. Instead, a leader must be selfless in those decisions that he must make. Unruly people cause someone to not be able to lead in any manner, which almost revokes their leadership and, in turn, the decision they must make. His way of taking this control back was to force anyone who revolted to be punished, even indirectly. Antigone is the sister of the brothers and has to decide if she is going to bury the shunned one and risk imprisonment, or listen to the laws of the gods and bury her brother and risk it all in the process. Creon is just focusing on specific qualities from his followers. He tunes in on gaining his obedience when he bans the burial of the soldiers against the city. It also can be said that some citizens would be comfortably confident and respectful that he was ruling well if they were for the city's side of the war. However, many did not feel this way, and most would not be loyal because there was a chance he would turn on them. It almost seems counterintuitive. Having every quality of leadership is very important to a leader and his followers. Without all the qualities, revolt is inevitable, as in the case of Antigone. Most people only wish to follow a leader who shows all the qualities that make a leader. These leaders are able to discern moral dilemmas. These good leadership decisions may have cost the leaders on a personal level. However, ultimately, they benefited the greater good. The decisions that leaders make can be unpopular to many people of the population, but there will almost never be a decision that is made that causes a complete unanimous agreement. That would only exist in a perfect, sin-free world. The ability to make that decision is what makes the leader, not the decision itself. One of the strong qualities of a leader is to be able to identify that one of his decisions may not be particularly popular to the people, but is able to still make or continue with their decisions, or at least weigh the two sides of an argument. Leaders must always pick a side because uncertainty in itself is the opposite of leadership. Any consequences to the bad decisions that were made are just something the leader must cooperate with. Overall, leaders must be able to be selfless when they are required to be and make decisions that affect many different people, either in an effective or a damaging way. In almost all cases, someone will consider a decision unfavorable. One of the main things that leaders must deal with in their careers is moral dilemma, which is very complicated. Simply put, a moral dilemma is a situation where someone must objectively weigh both sides of a situation full of moral ambiguity. A leader should be a philosopher in the way that they understand the perfect forms of the world. In the Metaphysics and a few other dialogues, Plato discusses the idea of perfect forms and bursts the theory of these forms. He writes about understanding the true forms of everything we see in the world. This includes virtue, beauty, good, and many other abstract thoughts. A true leader must know what they are trying to attain to be able to lead effectively. The Bible shows a great example of what leadership could consist of in Exodus 18:21. Moreover, look to be able men from around the world, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, or of tens. Something that can be taken from this is that men who are able to understand what they should try to attain and what they should fear are the best leaders. If someone has no idea of what perfect leadership is, they will not be able to complete anything like it. If a leader has a sense of wisdom about them, he can know how to guide someone. He understands justice to be able to consider a person and their actions. He has a sense of restraint to be able to show the followers an example of what to follow, and he must display courage to be able to show resilience in decisions that are made. If a leader falters in any of these main pillars, they will begin to lose the obedience, confidence, respect, and loyal cooperation of those who follow him. A true leader is the first to be willing to act. In Plato's Republic, he discusses the cave allegory, in which he discusses 3 prisoners that were bound at birth and forced to only experience the walls, or the walls as shadows upon the surface of the wall. One man was free to experience the world and took the opportunity to go out and experience it. He experienced fear and confusion at first because of the blinding light, but was able to adjust. Leading by example is one of the oldest ideas because real leaders are not commanding, but guiding others through action. Plato continues this theory when he talks about the good in people and the innate good. Good actions give strength to ourselves and inspire good actions in others. Innate good is something a leader must possess to be able to instill it in others. You cannot lead someone to good before first understanding the good. Plutarch's Lives has some good example of what could be considered moral dilemmas. Even if it does not first look like a moral dilemma, it can be. The book discusses in part morality of the situations. This will be used as evidence as well as that's a note that was supposed to go. One example is of the Caesar. In the later years of his life, a dilemma arises that provoked his murder and destroyed the Republic. How a charismatic leader should suppress anarchy and restore peace after civil war without ruling as a king and therefore abolishing the liberty of the citizens by turning them into subjects. This is one way that a leader decided to end all uproar in his realm. There's a flaw in his thought process, though. People have the freedom and liberty to choose to follow a leader. Taking away free will removes the possibility for people to choose and best candidate for leadership. This is similar to how God gives us free will to let ourselves be led to him and will not command us to do so. Plutarch's Lives is a conglomeration of the lives of Greek and Roman men and nobility. He spends a large amount of time talking about what leadership consists of and what makes a leader. Therefore, his book is a great way to understand it. The story of Nicias is a great example of leadership not being shown. He was a political and military leader who led entire armies and led Athens in politicking. However, he did not lead either successfully. For one example of the inadequacy, he once told his army to retreat later than he should have. He was able to attain loyal cooperation from his followers, which is one of the most vital parts of creating true leadership. The only way to be a good leader is to have loyal followership. Marcus Porcius Cato, better known as Cato the Younger, is a good example of what does make a good leader. He led the Optimates, which are best described as conservative senate in an aristocratical government. People should pursue positions of leadership only if they are motivated by judgment and reason, not rashly inspired by the vain pursuit of glory. a sense of rivalry or a lack of other meaningful activities. Jesus Christ is the best example of the leader, and his decisions are discussed in the Bible. Jesus, as the ultimate leader, led, and it cost him everything. He did this for the greater good and to give everyone else salvation. But among you, it will be different. Whomever that wants to be a leader among you must be a servant, or must be your servant. This talks about leaders having to serve their followers. However, leaders cannot pander to every need of people due to their imperfections as humans. One specific great example of Jesus guiding his disciples to win their obedience, confidence, respect, and loyal cooperation is in Matthew 14. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down off the boat, got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." This shows Jesus guiding Peter and other disciples to a path of obedience, confidence, respect, and loyal cooperation. Christ also guides us in a correct decision, but gives us the opinion to follow or not, which makes him a true leader and someone who does not command the masses. Leadership is the art of influencing and directing others in a way that will win their obedience, confidence, respect, and loyal cooperation, achieving a common objective. Leaders must fulfill the traits that make a good leader. They must make difficult moral dilemma decisions, no matter what the cost is personally. The leaders must make their decisions on a daily basis, but are able to balance the upsides and downsides to decide what is right for the greater good of society. They must not try to appease all of their followers, or they will become no more than a glorified administrator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roper. A couple parts of your paper, you've made reference to the distinction between leaders and administrators. And can you explain or just define for us in more detail what is the difference between a leader and an administrator?
A administrator is more of someone who organizes the actions of people, while leader guides a group of people towards some sort of goal.
All right, so for an administrator, is the goal already determined, and a leader is somebody who determines the goal for people that
Yes.
they'll be going towards?
Yes.
Okay. So an administrator is more of a fixed position where once the goal is determined, an administrator comes in to guide them towards
Exactly.
that. If the leader is in a position where he is actually the one who chooses a particular goal for people to lead, what faculty is it that allows him to choose that goal well?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, you talk about a leader as being somebody who is able to guide people towards a particular goal, and that he kind of chooses and sets that goal for them. That assumes that a leader must choose which goal to go after. And so my question is, what is it, or what faculty is it that allows a leader to choose a good goal?
I think the faculty of self-control and self-guidance.
Okay. Where does wisdom come into the life of a leader, and is it essential to his activity?
I would say it's essential because you cannot make the decision or you cannot make a good decision without the wisdom to understand the decision in itself.
Mm-hmm. I always like the story of King Midas. He was given any wish that he would desire, and he wished that everything he touched would turn into gold. And In that case, you see that the choice that he made was not very smart. He's foolish. He's not wise. Having everything you touch into gold is kind of a neat party trick, but not a good aspect to have in life, particularly when you're trying to eat or hug your daughter. Midas chose pretty poorly, and he was not capable of seeing what a good choice would be. Now, when a leader leads, how does a leader know that he's not leading his people towards having everything that they touch turn into gold, or leading them towards some sort of end that will actually be beneficial?
I think that would be the wisdom that they've gained from some type of experience of either leading in the past or some other source.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so you would say a leader needs to gain wisdom?
Yes.
All right. Is wisdom gained through certainty, or is it gained through uncertainty and questioning?
I think questioning is one characteristic that needs to be, or something you need to do to be able to gain wisdom. It's just a way to understand it truly.
Mm-hmm. One of the actually I never heard where this was from, but I heard a quote from Plato is that the sign of an educated man is that he can discuss anything without passion. So an educated man is a sort of man who's not, absolutely passionate about something. He's dispassionate about it and kind of, look at all the different sides and continually consider everything. And yet it seems like oftentimes a leader is somebody that needs to lead the charge, which means you're not sitting there asking questions, you're kind of setting a direction. And you have a quote in here where you said that a leader, you said leaders must always pick a side because uncertainty in itself is the opposite of leadership. And yet later on you said a leader should be like a philosopher. And philosophers, at least like Socrates, has lots and lots of questions. And it seems like it'd be difficult to have a philosopher as a leader who's always asking, well, what should our direction be today? So in the life of a good leader, do you have to stop asking questions? Do you always have to be certain? Is a good leader somebody who doesn't ask questions?
I think it's important to ask questions, whether that's of themselves or another, is just depending on the situation. And I think that not every leader is going to lead with full certainty because of just flaws as us being humans. We're not perfect. Well, God is the only one who is perfect.
Mm-hmm. So when should a leader ask questions and when should a leader charge ahead?
I think it depends on the situation specifically, but for the most part, I think there should be some questioning involved, but most often that question is of themselves and not of another.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just thinking about this, the last paper we were talking about the COVID situation, and, when somebody says, we've got a real problem here, we've got to do something about it. Or, do you really have a problem? And, Gavin Newsom has decided we have a really big problem here. And is it more important as a leader to stop and ask questions and say, well, do we have a big problem here? How do we know what a big problem is? How do we know when we're overreacting? So like in a situation like that, has Gavin Newsom picked a side and done that too quickly?
I think he's definitely picked a side, and I think that is mostly due to where he's gotten his wisdom from, or it could possibly just be for a power grab, which in itself is not for the good of the people.
Well then, how much does leadership require being willing to question the side that you've chosen?
I think it's definitely something that's necessary in some situations, but if you already understand what you're getting into, I think there isn't really much need for questioning, but it definitely depends on the situation.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Roper. Other questions?
Yes.
you talked a lot in your paper about how to keep your followers, like, and you did a really nice job with that, but you kind of went over what you need to win from followers, but not really how you win their respect and obedience and cooperation. Can you elaborate a little more on that?
Yes. So I think it's to be able to win the obedience and sorry, um, obedience, confidence, respect, and loyal cooperation. You need to be able to have people who trust in you, and the way to best way to earn trust is by making decisions and that are correct, and that is how you gain trust from people. It's the most basic sense. Yes.
So I liked your paper, but you talked about how it is the role of a leader to act rather than to refrain from action, and to choose rather than to not choose. But at times in leadership, it seems as though it is necessary to hold yourself when there's not enough information to hold yourself back and decide that you are not going to act. Decide that you're not going to, pick something just because. Sometimes omission is really the only way of coming to there's a chance that you would hurt something if you acted without full information. So I understand that you'd probably say that yes, there are times when it is the leader's job to refrain from action in certain circumstances. But would you say that overall, the mindset of a leader should be, how do I act in this, and then secondarily it should be, I should refrain, or should it first be, I should refrain, and then when you have more information, act?
I think that kind of refers back to the educating yourself first before making the decision. That's an important quality of a leader, just to be able to educate yourself. So I don't think it's necessarily refraining, but not instantly acting. They're still acting, but they aren't instantly acting. They're getting a little bit of information beforehand. Yes?
What would you say about leaders that have been able to control their citizens and have their backing and make decisions, but they've done it in a really horrible way, like dictators like Hitler or Stalin? Would you say that they showed the qualities of the leader?
Yeah, so I went over that briefly so I can understand why you might have missed it, but it is those people are still leading even if their decisions may not be moral. They're still leaders, but not moral leaders. I think that answers the question. Yes.
I had a question actually very similar to Heather's. So you mentioned how Odysseus showed weak leadership when he lost his followers, especially on Platos' island with the cattle. So is it possible to be a good leader and still lose your followers, seeing as they do have the free will to choose whether or not they'll follow?
So I think what you're asking is it possible to be a leader without followership? Is that basically?
Not necessarily, but so if you are a leader, you have to take into account that your followers may want different things than you.
Mm-hmm.
So can you be a good leader and to be decisive and to make decisions and to know what is the right decision and how to do it, but your followers don't want to follow you given their own free will?
So yeah, I think that is mostly just the sense of not everyone is going to follow you when you lead them in a particular situation. There are going to be some people that enjoy your decision, some people not. That's just a choice you have to make in moral dilemmas in leadership. You just have to make the decision and hope that you're followed by some people. Yes.
So you just talked about like moral dilemmas and stuff, and I was wondering, do you have a specific example where like the less moral option would be the better leadership like decision?
Mm-hmm.
Just yeah.
I think Creon is actually the best example of that. He needed to gain control of the city-state in some manner, so he made the decision to not allow anyone who fought against the city to be buried. So I think in that situation, it's not morally right what he made, the decision he made, but it also was a good leadership decision just to gain control. Yes.
How much is a leader defined by his actions? For instance, with the story of Nicias, if you remember the story of Nicias and Alcibiades, right? Nicias' soldiers liked him because he was a better example than Alcibiades. For example, because Alcibiades was rather selfish.
Yeah.
And so Nicias' men actually respected Nicias or something like. However, Nicias in the end did fail. So how much of a failure is Nicias? Was he a failure as a leader because his campaigns failed in the end, or was he a good leader because his men still respected him and did want to follow him?
He definitely had a lot of qualities of a leader, but he didn't have the wisdom behind it to be able to support it. So I think that's where he fails. And I kind of only talked about a particular part of Nicias, so I wasn't really applying the entire story to it.
I'd like you to explain more about the distinction between leadership and commanding. Can you just explain the difference in definition between those two?
Yes, one of my favorite subjects actually. It's the ability, leading is the ability to lead someone through guidance and direction, while commanding is more ordering people to make some direction. So it's kind of the difference between shepherding and commanding, basically.
So, can you give us examples of what would be leaders and commanders? I mean, it sounds like one's a military, the other's a political one, or don't political leaders also command? So, I mean, what would be examples of different roles that exemplify the position of leader or commander?
So if we want to talk about or I can talk about the state again, actually. Gavin Newsom has made many decisions without the proper guidance from any of his cabinet. He's made many decisions there, and just forced these laws upon anyone without any sort of voting beforehand. So I think in that case, he's a commander, but for the most part in American society, there's some type of voting process, which is what makes it more leadership instead of commanding.
All right, thank you very much.
But there are also many times when a leader does things that are not popular, but they still know it's for the greater good. And I think your idea of commanding is a little more like what we've just heard of commanding is that, if it's not democratic, and if the leader is forcing people to do something, that's commanding. But I know that that's just a little bit of the picture of what you believe. In society, there are often many times when a true leader has to distinguish themselves from a what was the word you used for someone who just kind of maintained the course of like a leader sets a goal and this person carries it. What was that term?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. Sorry.
What? Administrator, yeah.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so the administrator, a leader differentiates themselves from an administrator at times when they create something of their own or separate from, a lot of times, the desires of the people, because with their knowledge, they understand that sometimes they have to force people to do things that are, they have to use military force, they have to force production of, like FDR forced production of war supplies during the war. And it wasn't like everyone was with that. Not everyone wanted to do that, but still that's an important part of being a leader. So in that, what would you say is the difference between a commander and a leader who is good at enforcing things that people don't like for their own good?
So I think that is just, it goes back to, with leadership, having to accept that people aren't going to enjoy your decision in some manner. And I think it also refers back to commanders can still be leaders. It's just there's distinction there of whether they're always commanding people to do things or leading in most
whether
manners.
it's in certain situations or it's their entire leading style.
Yes. Anyone else? Yes.
Would you say then, kind of in line with leading and commanding, wouldn't it be better if a leader could switch between, in a way, moral and immoral commands and decisions, if it's needed to benefit the public? Could sometimes the leader be restrained by the necessary morality?
I'm sorry. I'm not sure what your question is.
Well, so would it be necessary for a good leader to be able to use moral decisions and immoral decisions?
Yes, I think that is kind of back with Creon, not making a moral decision, but making a good leadership decision. I think that answers your question. Yes.
Are you saying that it sounds like what you're saying is to be an effective leader, you have to be able to do all of the above. You have to know the difference between making decisions morally versus not, and being both a commander and a leader. It sounds like it's a very it's a balancing act.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a lot of finesse and when you say that when you finally just have to make a decision, you just have to make that decision and just stick with that, and it's going to work out the way that it works out.
Yes.
Sounds like a good job.
It definitely would be. Yes.
You referenced Jesus as an ultimate leader, as an example of good leadership in a culture, and even in a world where power and just strength and command and beauty and bronze and prestige, all of those things seem to be what the world respects. Do you think Jesus' leadership would still be effective today if leaders were to implement it?
Yes, I think so. I think his style of leadership is perfect, and we as people aren't perfect, so it's very difficult to attain the perfect leadership, and it's almost hard to define as well, because we can't truly perfectly understand what leadership is without his guidance.
And Ellery or Ina, do you guys have questions? Jack has not been looking at you. Or Nate or Dawson?
I totally forgot to look behind me.
Yes. Okay, they're fine. All right.
Okay.
Other questions?
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Roper.
Thank you. Yes.
All right. And we'll come back at 1 o'clock after lunch and continue on.
Are we going?